Chapter 1061, A Chance of Victory. The Weiwu army behind Lu Shu surged forth. They had 1,000 people and were up against 5,000. There seemed to be a disparity in strength, but it was different when they actually fought. On one hand, the Weiwu army was very tight. They were waiting for the time to kill. Furthermore, the Black Feather army did not expect the Weiwu army to get so close to them. On the other hand, the soldiers of the Black Feather army were attacking the Weiwu army. Even if the Weiwu army did not wear any magical armor, they still had their defenses up. They could not be caught. The Weiwu army did not need any strategy to jump about in the Black Feather army military camp. They were very calm. The commander who had asked Lu Shu to kill himself stood still. Lu Shu calmly looked at him. The commander did not dare to move at all, as he knew who was in front of him. This young man was able to kill 12 patrons. He was nothing to him. Although this commander was rather strong, he was nowhere near the patrons. Even if he was on par with them, he was only one person. He was in despair. It was as if he had met a master. He was full of helplessness. So this was the pressure of the strongest person besides the masters. Lu Shu's mask slowly changed, revealing his original appearance. Suddenly, he said with bitter hatred, "What's wrong with you? How could you run away when facing a strong enemy? Now, are you asking an impressive commander to kill himself? I feel bad for him." The commander of the Black Feather army was dumbfounded when he heard this. This was his first time hearing an enemy feeling sorry for them. But Lu Shu really did feel bad. Lu Shu had been out since the morning. After being laughed at by Lu Xiaoyu, he had spent an entire day in the mountains before returning to the campsite. Even their commander could not recognize him. Now, he was asked to kill himself. Would you be able to endure this? Of course not. Lu Shu and the commander stood and looked at each other. Wails came from behind the commander. His soldiers were dying one by one. They could not launch a counterattack. The commander was about to cry as well. If you wanted to kill us, at least say something. At that moment, the larger troops from the Weiwu army had rushed over as well. When Lu Shu ordered them to kill, some mice from the mice army had sent the information back. Lu Shu had not attacked because he was waiting for Lu Xiaoyu to take this commander's spirit. He would only be able to plan once he had concrete information. Lu Xiaoyu slowly walked to the entrance of the military camp. She observed the scene. Did you fail again? Lu Shu panicked. What do you mean by again? Why do you have to use that word? Don't you know why I use that word? Lu Xiaoyu was not being kind. She was completely disinterested in any of Lu Shu's plans. Furthermore, she was extremely sure that Lu Shu would definitely fail. This could not even be explained for science. This fell under metaphysics. Lu Shu looked at the commander of the Black Feather army. Then, he said to Lu Xiaoyu, "We have gathered another rank 1 for us to use." Furthermore, as the commander, he should know some classified information. The commander of the Black Feather army was dumbfounded. What did he mean by gathered another rank 1 for us to use? Did you think that highly of yourselves? What would he be used for? Lu Xiaoyu looked at the commander of the Black Feather army. There was some dislike in her eyes. Fine. The commander of the Black Feather army was dead. To Lu Shu, there was no need for long battles if they had the upper hand. They would deal with it in a clear-cut manner. Now, although Lu Xiaoyu's 3 other spirits were only rank 1s, she had used the Soul Pearl to raise them to peak rank 1. Earlier, when Lu Shu had killed the 12 patrons, Lu Xiaoyu did not let their spirits go to waste. She fed them to the Bishop, Anthony, and Johnson. Thus, the strength of these 3 spirits surpassed that of typical rank 1s. They would be able to win with ease even in a one-on-one battle with the patrons. Even if they were very strong, and even if Anthony's strength had surpassed that of the patrons, the problem was, they would not be able to advance to the master realm. Lu Shu and Lu Xiaoyu understood that if they wanted to advance their spirits to the master class, they had to use the natural laws from the masters. It was not up to them to decide. The natural law of a master was like an entrance pass for a soul. They could not be opportunistic. Lu Shu had started to think about how to give Lu Xiaoyu the spirit of a master. Would over 60 rank ones in black armor be able to defeat a master? When Lu Shu thought about this, he became excited. He looked at Lu Xiaoyu. Do you have any useful information? Lu Xiaoyu calmly said, this guy has over 30 concubines. Lu Shu was speechless. Why do you care about this? Tell me something more useful. The space pathway is over 100 kilometers away. I have obtained its exact location, said Lu Xiaoyu. But it is very tightly guarded. Duanmu Huangqi might have arrived there, including the 2 remaining masters under him. Lu Shu felt that this was slightly troublesome. If there were only 1 or 2 masters, he would still dare to attack them head-on. After all, they had the black armor with them. Furthermore, they had the Imperial Dragon soldiers. Why not try to defeat 1 or 2 masters? The rank 3 soldiers of the sea could rely on their black armor and face the puppet masters. But if Duanmu Huangqi was around, he would hesitate. It was not that Lu Shu did not dare to risk his life. He felt that under this circumstance, if the space pathway opened up, it would be better for the Wei Wu army and Yeting to work together. For some reason, Lu Shu had great confidence in Yeting. Even if Duanmu Huangqi was a lord of heaven, Lu Shu did not think that Yeting would not be able to defeat Duanmu Huangqi. He was a 1 in 6 billion genius. Although Duanmu Huangqi had advanced to the master realm a long time ago, this did not mean that he was much stronger. Some people had lived longer than Duanmu Huangqi, but they only had the strength of a rank 1. Lu Shu had come here because he hoped to work together with Yeting when the space pathway opened up once again. Then, the situation would be perfect. Once the Wei Wu army was able to work with Yeting and get rid of the masters in the west region, the rest of the Black Feather army would be a breeze to deal with. But would Duanmu Huangqi give him a chance to do so? Lu Shu did not know. No one knew. Do you have the exact time when the space pathway will open up? Lu Shu asked suddenly. It seems as if they don't know how often the pathway opens up either. They only know that the rate is getting faster and faster. It will open up within a month, but they do not know the exact timing either, said Lu Xiaoyu. Do you have any plans? Lu Shu said, you might not believe me, but I have a plan. The ground in the Black Feather Army military camp had been renewed by Anthony. The blood and corpses were buried underground. It was as if the Black Feather Army had not fought at all. The soldiers of the Black Feather Army inside the camp had been replaced with soldiers from the Wei Wu Army. Lu Shu's plan was that since he had planned to replace the Black Feather Army, why not do it in one go? He felt that there was nothing wrong with this plan. After all, his current identity was that of a rank 1 commander. You could not just ask your rank 1 commander to kill himself. That would be destroying your own empire. If you did not treasure rank 2s because there was an abundance of them in the Luniverse, it would still make sense. After all, even if one died, they could be easily replaced. The problem was, rank 1s were not that common. Lu Shu stood at the entrance of the military camp. He was melancholic. He could stand being humiliated by Lu Xiaoyu. But he was sad when he thought about the boastful remark he made to Li Haitan. Even someone as rigid as Li Haitan could doubt his plans. At that moment, horsemen suddenly rushed over to the military camp. Lu Shu looked at the black flag they were holding. They were the messengers of the Black Feather Army. Lu Shu stood up straight. Before the messengers could approach him, he roared, I have an order. Head towards Wanxi Plains at once. We cannot afford to delay. As he spoke, the messenger threw a black reel at Lu Shu. Then, he headed towards the other direction, probably to notify the rest of the Black Feather Army. Lu Shu picked up the reel. It was a document ordering the soldiers to arrive in Wanxi Plains within 1 day. He stopped that messenger. Wait. Before the messenger could go any further, he was dumbfounded. He turned around. Yes? The messenger was dead. Lu Shu now had the time to think about how he would deal with this. They had been looking for the Wei Wu army, but suddenly, they were to gather at Wanxi Plains. Something major must have happened. Is the space pathway going to open? Lu Shu turned around and said to the entire Wei Wu army, "Let's go." The Wei Wu army soldier behind him rapidly got on their horses. They followed Lu Shu and headed towards Wanxi Plains. Lu Shu had been waiting for a very long time. It was finally time. If someone asked him what he desired most now, he would definitely reply with, to go home. His friends and comrades were on Earth. Now, he was going to go to war for them. To be honest, Lu Shu had never expected himself to turn out this way. In the past, he had often thought for himself. He had even thought that those who selflessly sacrificed themselves for others were foolish. The first time he stood below the flag and took an oath, he felt that the passion was amusing. But now, he understood that there were some things that could not be measured just by its value. Needless to say, this feeling was very interesting. Behind Lu Shu, Li Haitan asked curiously, "Great Lord, what is happening? Where are we going? Let me ask you something. There is good food to eat and fun things to do in my hometown. Are you willing to follow me?" Lu Shu turned and asked. He calmly looked at the Wei Wu army soldiers behind him. This was his last time he would let the Wei Wu army decide. "We will be anywhere where the Great Lord is," said Lu Yizhao. "Sure." Lu Shu nodded. "Follow me home. But before that, we have to kill some people." Chapter 1062, Purely Lu Shu. The Wei Wu army were about 100 kilometers away from the Wanxi Plains. Lu Shu thought they would probably take about half a day to reach if they rode the horses. That was because the horses in the Luniverse were extremely fast, way faster than those on Earth. If he did not ride a horse, he would probably reach in slightly more than an hour's time, without going on full speed. However, Lu Shu led the Wei Wu army and took his time to head over while riding the horses. He was not in a rush as he wanted to know the situation at the Wanxi Plains. Lu Yizhao had already secretly left the team to check out the situation. The mice army had also dispersed. The gray mice looked like spies planted amongst the Wei Wu army. They would report everything they had heard and seen back to the Wei Wu army. Little Fury was collecting all the information on Lu Xiaoyu's shoulders before reporting it to Lu Shu. Before the messengers arrived, the Black Feather Army formed a barrier with 5,000 soldiers. One reason was to guard the passageway to the Wanxi Plains from all directions, while the other reason was to look for the Wei Wu army. Since the horsemen were useless, he sent the entire army to look for him. There are still over 10,000 people in the Wanxi Plains after some of them dispersed. Lu Xiaoyu reported the news obtained from the mice army. However, the mice army is unable to go too close and cannot tell if Duanmu Huangqi and his master has already arrived. Lu Shu said calmly after thinking, "We have to be careful. We can't afford to mess around with the master. It will be good if we can contact the Heavenly Network to collaborate with Nieting. Now, we don't even know what is happening on Earth." Last night when Lu Shu was troubled over this, he ran over to ask Zhang Weiyu if he could advance to the Master Realm. That made Zhang Weiyu speechless. "Do you think it is so easy to advance to the Master Realm?" Lu Shu said, "Isn't there something called breaking and repairing? Everyone did that. If Li Haitan and the rest could speed up their training progress, why are you still stuck at this stage?" "You make sense." Zhang Weiyu was stunned for a while. "I almost got convinced. Can you compare someone who advanced from rank 3 to rank 2 with the advancement to the Master Realm? No way. In order to advance to the Master Realm, one had to understand the laws and rules extremely well. Moreover, one had to take care of the coordination of one's spiritual and physical energy. Actually, I am talking bullshit. I don't know how to advance to the Master Realm, or I would have already advanced long ago. In reality, when Lu Shu gave the refresher fruit to Zhang Weiyu and the rest, he was hoping for one of them to advance to the Master Realm. After all, didn't Chen Bailey and Li Xianyi both reach the Master Realm? After Zhang Weiyu and the rest finished eating the refresher fruit, their powers increased slightly. Instead of 2 patrons, they could fight against 3 patrons instead. However, the problem was, even though the quantity changed, the quality might not have changed. Lu Shu felt that the imperial palace was originally the guards of the King of Gods. It was normal for one to be more powerful than the guards of the Lord of Heaven. However, why was there no master despite following the breaking and repairing route? However, Lu Shu neglected 2 points. On one hand, Zhang Weiyu had a different condition from Chen Bailey and Li Xianyi. Although their foundations were destroyed, they could continue to train. However, they were unable to make a breakthrough of the bottleneck. It could be compared to a reservoir. It was reserving water, but water kept leaking. If they wanted to retain their powers, they had to persevere and train. Training was like a ship advancing against the currents, and stopping would result in being pushed backward. However, Zhang Weiyu and the rest struggled. They were unable to train as the source of water for their reservoir had been disrupted. Therefore, they could not make any advancements at all. On the other hand, it required aptitude to advance to the Master Realm. One could not simply depend on the number of hours of training to advance. Therefore, that was the reason why both Li Xianyi and Chen Bailey advanced after eating the refresher fruit, but none of the people, including Zhang Weiyu, advanced to the Master Realm. Lu Shu was slightly indignant. You mean none of us can advance? At least give us some hope. Zhang Weiyu thought about it. Now that you mention it, there is really a source of hope. Who? Lu Shu was curious. As the commander of the Imperial Palace soldiers, Zhang Weiyu did not have faith in himself but said there was hope on someone else. Lu Yizhao, affirmed Zhang Weiyu. Why? Lu Shu did not understand. When all of you advanced to rank 1, he was still at rank 2, he managed to catch up. You think that he is feeling free from being a commander? Zhang Weiyu shook his head. He had entered a realm of self-exploration, he only goes with his desires and does not care about the outcome. You know that as a master, one had to find the most powerful side of oneself, turning oneself into a rule that was separated from the natural laws. Lu Shu was stunned. He knew how it worked too. If the master's purpose before training was to resonate with the heaven and earth, then after reaching the Master Realm, one's purpose was to forget about resonating with the heaven and earth and complete one's own laws. Lu Yizhao had an extreme stance on self-exploration. He signed the Treaty of Alliance with Lu Shu when he felt that Lu Shu was the King of Gods. He took on the role of a commander as he liked it more. He did anything he wanted to do and his state of mind became simpler. Actually, Zhang Weiyu did not mention that he managed to be so carefree because Lu Yizhao met Lu Shu. How many ordinary people were able to do anything they wanted to do? How many people need not worry about the mindset of the public? An ordinary middle-aged person would fear illness, death, and losing their jobs. That was because they had to consider their responsibility as an individual and as a family member. That was what was holding them back. A practitioner too had to worry about the danger in the outside world and one's own aspirations. A master once said that nobody from a wealthy family would become a master. That was because everyone in the wealthy family was overly concerned and worried about things, making it impossible for them to be clear of worries. One who spent efforts to make things right would never advance to the Master Realm. Meanwhile, Lu Yizhao was halfway through the advancement. Lu Shu thought about it for a while. I think my state of mind is very pure too. I can advance to the master realm easily, right? Zhang Weiyu was speechless. Did he seriously flatter himself like that? Lu Xiaoyu said calmly, yes, you purely love money. From Lu Shu's distress, plus 666. Meanwhile, Zhang Weiyu fell silent. He suddenly recalled the Lu Shu he had known. He was extremely determined with what he wanted to do. He would kill anyone he wanted to kill and do anything to protect the people he wanted to protect. If that was not considered a pure mindset, then nobody else in the world would have a pure mindset. Chapter 1063, No Organization, No Discipline. At this moment, Lu Yizhao returned to the Weiwu army. Lu Shu realized that Lu Yizhao indeed looked very happy every day. It was a happiness due to the satisfaction of his mind and radiated from inside. Lu Shu suddenly realized that Zhang Weiyu's thoughts made a lot of sense. Lu Yizhao's current appearance and state of mind was much cleaner than the first time they met. Initially, Lu Yizhao looked as though he was surrounded by a layer of dust and looked extremely dull. Now, he looked as though all the dust on his body had been washed away. Lu Yizhao landed beside Lu Shu. King, I checked and there's nothing odd. The other troops of the Black Feather Army are also rushing to the Wanxi Plains. The Wanxi Plains has been completely locked and it seems like the space pathway is indeed about to open. Lu Shu nodded. Advance at full speed. They headed to the Wanxi Plains in order to hide there. At this moment, Lu Shu had a bad premonition. He felt as though there would be an unavoidable conflict between the Luniverse and the Earth. From the memory fragments, Lu Xiaoyu learnt that the Black Feather Army called the space on the other side of the space pathway as the Land of Forefathers. This seemed to be passed down from Duanmu Huangqi. Land of Forefathers. Lu Shu pondered over this term. He recalled that the old King of Gods probably came from the Earth, and felt that the relationship between the Luniverse and the Earth was more complicated. When they arrived at the Wanxi Plains, the entire Wanxi Plains had turned into army camps. They could not see the end of the land when they looked from a high ground. Lu Shu had once interacted with the large organizations on the Tiger Back. However, back then, the large organizations had ulterior motives and now, the Black Feather Army became an elite army. If the Heavenly Network had went against the Black Feather Army, they would not win even with the help of the Flood of Bronze. Now, Lu Shu gained the possession of the Weiwu army. At this moment, Lu Shu realized that this unplanned situation seemed to signify his fate in helping the Heavenly Network get out of trouble. Sometimes, nobody could understand fate. Lu Shu arrived at the front of the army camp with the Weiwu army. Lion Leopard Army of the Black Feather Army, gather. Even when 5,000 soldiers gathered, there seemed to be no difference as there were too many soldiers in the Black Feather Army. The registrar of the Lion Leopard Army, who was responsible for receiving Lu Shu and the rest, took a glance at them, before checking the document with the tiger seal. When everything was cleared, he checked the documents of the 5 commanders and the 10 officers' documents before instructing them to settle down nearby. Lu Shu glanced at Lu Xiaoyu. Look, we have successfully entered the opponent's camp and nobody realized. Lu Xiaoyu sneered. Lu Shu had once said that he believed that everything would have a good ending. If there was nothing good, that means it has yet to end. On the other hand, Lu Xiaoyu believed that Lu Shu's plan would all end up failing. If it did not fail, it means that it has yet to end. The difference of this location from the Heavenly Network was that the Heavenly Network sent an army to settle their accommodation, while the Black Feather Army required the commander to settle the money, food, soldiers, horses, and tents all by himself. However, that was what the Weiwu army was good at. They had set up many tents on their way. Lu Shu examined the entire Black Feather Army behind the area allocated to them. He realized that the entire Black Feather Army was in a constant state of battle preparation. All of them had their weapons in their hands and nobody fooled around. This was a terrifying army. Everyone was willing to sacrifice themselves for their ambitions. Neglecting the issue with the master, Lu Shu had to find a way to hold the Black Feather Army back. If all of them went to Earth, even if all the practitioners on Earth collaborated, they would not be able to stop the Black Feather Army. How to hold them back? Lu Shu and Lu Xiaoyu discussed for a long while, but there was no better way than killing. At this moment, just after they finished setting up their camps, Lu Shu suddenly saw an army, led by the registrar of the Black Feather Army, walking towards them. Lu Shu was stunned. Why did he bring so many people over? This felt odd. Could it be that the Black Feather Army discovered his identity? He went forward. Why are you here, sir? Lu Yizhao and the rest went towards Lu Shu. However, everyone remained calm and did not attack. The registrar said calmly, I have something to ask you. At this moment, Lu Shu realized that the other Black Feather Army were gradually surrounding the territory of the Weiwu Army. Lu Shu was confused. How did he expose himself? Lu Shu suppressed his curiosity and asked, Please ask, sir. You guys came from the southwest, right? If I recall correctly, it should be the southwest, continued the registrar. Yes. Lu Shu thought about it. The Weiwu Army had never been to the southeast, they kept changing their locations, there was nothing wrong. At this moment, the registrar suddenly asked, Why amongst the 4 armies at the southwest, only your army came over? The rest of the Black Feather Army had all gathered, but only the southwest side met problems. When you came, did you report the abnormality to me? Sir, there is no abnormality, said Lu Shu. The registrar laughed coldly. All 3 armies did not come, and you say that there's no abnormality? Pull him over for an interrogation. Lu Shu felt that he was King wronged. The Weiwu Army really did not attack the other 3 troops of the Black Feather Army in the southwest. After all, he wanted to lower his suspicion when he sneaked into the Black Feather Army, so he decided to choose the southeast. Therefore, Lu Shu did not meet any of the 3 troops of the Black Feather Army who had yet to arrive. However, why didn't they come over? That had nothing to do with Lu Shu. He was so wronged because he was questioned for something that had nothing to do with himself? Lu Shu wanted to look for the 3 troops and ask them why they did not go over. Attacking the Earth was such an important task and they decided not to go over? Do they still view themselves as a part of an organization? Do they still have discipline? At this moment, Li Haitan, who was beside Lu Shu, said softly, King, you killed the messenger. Lu Shu was stunned. Lu Shu almost broke down immediately. The other 3 troops did not receive any news because he killed the messenger? At this moment, Lu Shu finally figured out why the other 3 troops did not go over. They did not even know that they were supposed to gather at the Wanxi Plains. Lu Shu looked into the sky gloomily. Attack. At that moment, the registrar, who was laughing coldly, suddenly saw the soldiers of the Black Feather Army behind Lu Shu don their new armor upon Lu Xiaoyu's instructions. Weiwu Army's magical armor. Chapter 1064, Your saber is mine. This time, even Zhang Weiyu and the rest wore the new black armor. The Weiwu Army no longer held back. They had to find their way through killing the Black Feather Army. The armor were distributed by Lu Shu when they set up their tents and were hidden in the tents. All the soldiers in the Weiwu Army knew that the final bloody battle was impending. They wanted to follow the king and return to their hometown. There were nearly 20,000 soldiers of the Black Feather Army in front of the Weiwu Army. However, they did not feel anything about it as each of them had the capability to fight against 100. The only thing in their mind was to go to the hometown that their king talked about. There would be good food and entertainment. However, the most important thing was that it was the place where the king wanted to go to. The Black Feather Army, who were initially surrounding the Weiwu Army, realized that something was amiss, and immediately began shooting their arrows. In a blink of an eye, the rain of swords formed a gigantic web on the top of the Weiwu Army's campsite. However, the Weiwu Army was unafraid of the Black Feather swords. They were all above rank 2 and were unharmed. At that moment, the Weiwu army was moving through the spaces between tents. They caught the arrows with their bare hands and threw them back. The heavy black feather arrows became their weapons for a counterattack. Be it in speed or in strength, the Weiwu army overpowered the black feather army. After the one wave of swords, the Weiwu army was not injured at all, but there were many casualties amongst the black feather army. Many of the soldiers in the black feather army were stunned. Although they knew that the Weiwu army was very powerful, most of those who had met the Weiwu army had already died, and they felt extremely helpless when they witnessed the disparity in power with their own eyes. The soldiers of the Weiwu army were like spirits who were uncontrollable. The registrar who was standing in front of Lu Shu wanted to flee when he realized that something was amiss. However, when he retreated, Lu Yizhao and Dong Yi followed him extremely closely and did not give him a chance to escape. Then, the registrar drew a long saber from his invisible storage equipment and struck in Lu Yizhao's direction, causing a radiance of the saber to be seen. However, he was not counterattacking, he was taking the opportunity to fly into the sky. However, just as he reached 2 meters, he heard a voice from above his head, "Get down." At this moment, the registrar realized that there was another person above his head, Zhang Weiyu. Zhang Weiyu attacked with his sword. He did not use the trident. Instead, he used an ordinary padao from the Black Feather Army. Lu Shu asked him why he did not use the magical weapons, and Zhang Weiyu said that he was used to the padao. At this moment, Zhang Weiyu struck and said, "Your saber is mine." 3 rank 1 individuals collaborated to kill the registrar. Within a few seconds' time, the registrar of the Black Feather Army was dead. It should be noted that he had a very high rank in the army and was only below the rank of the commander. At this moment, Lu Shu witnessed the tactics used by the Imperial Dragon soldiers. He had heard Zhang Weiyu say that the Imperial Dragon soldiers had always gone all out for everything they did. This was a rule imposed by the old King of Gods, as he was worried that the army would underestimate their enemies when they became more powerful. Therefore, when Zhang Weiyu and the rest decided to kill the registrar, they had already made up their mind to collaborate and make sure the registrar did not have a chance to survive. Zhang Weiyu picked up the registrar's saber and looked at it. It is SOSO, but no matter what, it is still a magical weapon. Lu Shu asked curiously, where did the other weapons of the Imperial Dragon soldiers go? Zhang Weiyu said after thinking, 80% of them are probably still in the palace of the King of Gods. Lu Shu said, I don't think there's a chance for me to retrieve it for you. I have no idea when I will return. Any sabers can kill, smiled Zhang Weiyu while holding a saber with blood stains. When Lu Shu first saw Zhang Weiyu was like an old farmer holding a hoe with soil. Yet now, Zhang Weiyu was holding onto a saber and looked much younger. His black armor made him look extremely powerful. Perhaps, this was the aura that an Imperial Dragon soldier should have. He had once heard from Lu Yizhao that everyone in the Imperial Dragon soldiers was born to kill, and was able to kill everyone whom the King of Gods wanted to kill. It was barely 2 minutes since the registrar came over to question Lu Shu. At that moment, most of the Black Feather Army who were surrounding the Weiwu army had fled or died. Only 1,000 of them were left from the 5,000 soldiers. The Black Feather Army troops nearby were notified, and everyone who was in the preparation mode gathered at the fastest speed possible, ready to attack the Weiwu army. However, at that moment, they suddenly realized that the Weiwu army was not planning to flee and was determined to kill. Nobody understood why the Weiwu army was so ambitious. The red tassels of the Weiwu army followed behind Lu Shu like a flood. This time, Lu Shu was the leader of the entire Weiwu army. Burn down the camp, said Lu Shu. Fire was unable to hurt practitioners. However, Lu Shu's intention was not to hurt anyone but rather to hinder the vision of the Black Feather Army. The battle came much earlier than expected. However, Lu Shu was prepared to burn down the entire Black Feather Army into ashes. Zhang Weiyu and the rest wore their black armor and hid in the army. They did not attack, as having Li Haitan to attack the Black Feather Army was sufficient. Nobody had ever survived after the Weiwu Army's attack. Zhang Weiyu and the rest were waiting patiently for the master of their opponent to attack. They had already split into two groups who would attack the two masters respectively. It was impossible for 20 or more rank 1 experts to kill a master, as the disparity in power was too huge. However, Zhang Weiyu and the rest were not ordinary rank 1s. They were the Imperial Palace soldiers of the Imperial Dragon soldiers. Zhang Weiyu knew that it was difficult for them to kill the master and they might end up with many casualties. However, that did not stop them, as they accomplished it before. In the era when the Imperial Dragon soldiers was at their peak, they had killed a master. While Zhang Weiyu and the rest were preparing, Lu Shu was thinking about whether it was possible for him and Lu Xiaoyu to kill Duanmu Huangqi together. At this moment, Lu Shu's sword skills and celestial map had both reached the standard of rank 1. Moreover, he had a lot of trump cards that he had yet to use. With Lu Xiaoyu's assistance and their chemistry, even the master would not be able to do whatever he pleased. The entire universe were wary of the fact that the Weiwu army had made their way to the Black Feather army for revenge. However, nobody thought that Lu Shu dared to kill Duanmu Huangqi. However, Lu Shu dared to do so. Lu Xiaoyu hid underground. Anthony followed Lu Shu's footsteps closely. Meanwhile, she was resting and waiting for the best opportunity to attack. Chapter 1065, What Family Background? The Weiwu army went against the tides in the sea of Black Feather army. Lu Shu led at the front and killed people with the flick of his sword energy. The black soft armor worn by the Black Feather army was unable to defend against Lu Shu's invisible sword energy. At this moment, Lu Shu's invisible sword energy had surpassed 10,000. That was extremely detrimental to the Black Feather army. However, Zhang Weiyu and Lu Yizhao, who were following behind Lu Shu, knew that Lu Shu had yet to go all out to kill the Black Feather army. That was because everyone was waiting for the master to attack. That was what they had to be wary of. Initially, when Lu Shu was allocating the roles, he told them that once the three masters of the West region, including Duanmu Huangqi, attacked, the Imperial Dragon soldiers, led by Zhang Weiyu, would defend against the other two masters. Lu Shu did not mention Duanmu Huangqi, but Zhang Weiyu and the rest knew that he was planning to fight against him along with Lu Xiaoyu. He was a master. Zhang Weiyu and the rest were worried, as it was a risky decision. If there was a difference in power amongst the masters, Duanmu Huangqi was definitely the most powerful batch. The senior disciple of the Sword Hut was only slightly better than him. Who knew if Duanmu Huangqi had other backup plans? Weiwu army was like a rock that was extremely strong. Meanwhile, the Black Feather army were like waves that kept ramming into the rock, but was broken after they rammed into the rock. The Black Feather army attempted to form the sword formation in front of the Weiwu army. Some people said that the Black Feather army's sword formation was like the hills of mountains, as they appeared continuously. The people in the front row inserted their padao slantedly into the ground and defended against the powerful opponent with their own powers and the force from the ground. Meanwhile, the Black Feather army at the back waited for the opportunity to kill the prey ahead of them. It was a continuous process. However, just when the sword formation was formed, the Weiwu army broke it down, as the disparity in skills were too large. Moreover, although the padao was longer than ordinary swords, it was definitely not as long as a trident. In the blink of an eye, the sword formation formed by the Black Feather army was broken down from where Lu Shu was standing. The internal structure of the formation was completely destroyed. Lu Shu was somewhat curious, why isn't the master acting yet? Nobody could answer this question, including the Black Feather army. Li Haitan suddenly said, "Perhaps they are scared of us." Lu Shu flicked his finger and a beam of sword energy penetrated one of the chests of the soldier of the Black Feather army, causing blood to splatter on the face of the soldier who was standing behind. At this moment, the sword energy had not stopped and went on to break open the soft helmet of the soldier behind. He turned and looked at Li Haitan. It is good to be confident. At this moment, Lu Shu stopped using his sword energy as it was too slow. Killing an individual was not what was required in a battle. Meanwhile, he wanted to keep all the backup tactics for Duanmu Huangqi. Lu Shu whipped out a long sword that was made from the resources gathered from various large organizations. Suddenly, Zhang Weiyu and the rest stopped moving as they felt a sense of danger from Lu Shu. At the next moment, Lu Shu swung his sword and the body of the sword broke apart at an extremely fast speed. Then, a gigantic wave of sword energy rippled outwards. The Black Feather Army soldiers who were involved suffered internal injuries and died. This strike killed hundreds of people. Initially, the attacking speed of the Weiwu army was already fast, but they still had to face the defense of the Black Feather Army. Now, there was suddenly several hundred meters of space in front of them. Lu Shu sighed, indeed, those organizations would not produce any quality products for us. All of them are for one-time usage. In reality, the magical swords made by the large organizations were not as indecent as what Lu Shu had imagined. They were so easily destroyed because the energy Lu Shu used was too powerful. In the past, Lu Shu had managed to train until he reached the level of using a tree branch as sword and having all of the leaves stay intact after the battle. However, as he went full out, he no longer controlled the extent of his energy. Zhang Weiyu was stunned when he saw this. In the past, when he first encountered Lu Shu, it was terrifying for him to use the sword energy as a rank 6. Yet now, Lu Shu killed several hundred practitioners with one strike and broke a magical longsword. He broke the magical longsword as he wished? What kind of family background did he have? Did he own a mine? Then, Zhang Weiyu saw Lu Shu whip out another magical longsword. At this moment, the Black Feather Army was also surprised. Initially, they were stunned by the large number of deaths of their members. However, after seeing the sword break open in Lu Shu's hand, they heaved a sigh of relief as they realized it was for one-time usage only. It seemed like Lu Shu was unable to kill in such a large-scale manner again. However, what surprised them was the fact that Lu Shu had more than one sword. One sword, and another sword. The ripple spread out in front of Lu Shu, along with the blood of the soldiers of the Black Feather Army. It looked like a blooming flower. The soldiers behind the Black Feather Army thought that Lu Shu would run out of swords, but he never stopped. The Black Feather Army who came to attack the Weiwu Army increased to over 50,000 soldiers in an hour's time, but decreased to 20,000 in the next hour. Meanwhile, only a handful of the soldiers in the Weiwu Army were injured. It felt as though Lu Shu was killing like a magician. In fact, nobody witnessed such battles before. During a battle, there would be some casualties and the loser was the party who could not last through the battle. Yet now, because he was too powerful, none of the rank 1 patrons in the Black Feather Army was willing to go forward. The master had yet to appear, and the ordinary soldiers of the Black Feather Army could not even defend against Lu Shu's attack. Zhang Weiyu suddenly thought that if he was the owner of a gambling den in the palace, he would definitely earn a lot of money from starting a bet regarding the number of swords Lu Shu had. Nobody expected this to happen. Lu Shu used his swords without any reservations. Only Lu Xiaoyu knew that even if Lu Shu continued to do this for one more day, he would not finish using his swords. Back then, the large organizations were too generous. Lu Shu did not expect himself to accumulate this many weapons. Of course, the large organizations did not expect this too. However, Lu Xiaoyu was certain that although these magical weapons were used by the practitioners and the Weiwu army did not need those, it was still valuable. Lu Shu, who had a stingy nature, suddenly started splurging. It was not because his personality changed, but rather because he really wanted to go back home and did not want the soldiers in the heavenly network to fight. As she saw how Lu Shu attacked continuously, she suddenly thought that perhaps this was why Nie Ting wanted Lu Shu to be the 9th heavenly king. In fact, Nie Ting was probably still waiting for this day to come.
What does it mean to be happy? 'Cause it looks like we all don't know. Glass half full or empty, man, we just putting on a show. Try to look to the heavens,